power of... Such was the way in which Mary Baker Eddy became the founder and high priestess of a new religion, Christian Science, the only great religious faith ever established by a woman, a religion that has encircled the globe. Your problem. I am not a Christian Scientist, but the longer I live, the more deeply I am convinced of the tremendous power of thought. As a result of many years spent in teaching adults, I know men and women can banish worry, fear, and various kinds of illnesses, and can transform their lives by changing their thoughts. I know. I have seen such incredible transformations performed hundreds of times. I have seen them so often that I no longer wonder at them. For example, one of these incredible transformations, which illustrate the power of thought, happened to one of my students. He had a nervous breakdown. What brought it on? A worry. This student told me, I worried about everything. I worried because I was too thin, because I thought I was losing my hair, because I feared I would never make enough money to get married, because I felt I would never make a good father, because I feared I was losing the girl I wanted to marry, because I felt I was not living a good life. I worried about the impression I was making on other people. I worried because I thought I had stomach ulcers. I could no longer work. I gave up my job. I built up tension inside me until I was like a boiler without a safety valve. The pressure got so unbearable that something had to give. And it did. If you have ever had a nervous breakdown, pray God that you never do, for no pain of the body can exceed the excruciating pain of an agonized mind. My breakdown was so severe that I couldn't talk, even to my own family. I had no control over my thoughts. I was filled with fear. I would jump at the slightest noise. I avoided everybody. I would break out crying for no apparent reason at all. Every day was one of agony. I felt that I was deserted by everybody, even God. I was tempted to jump into the river and end it all. I decided instead to take a trip to Florida, hoping that a change of scene would help me. As I stepped on the train, my father handed me a letter and told me not to open it until I reached Florida. I landed in Florida during the height of the tourist season. Since I couldn't get in a hotel, I rented a sleeping room in a garage. I tried to get a job on a tramp freighter out of Miami, but had no luck, so I spent my time on the beach. I was more wretched in Florida than I had been at home, so I opened the envelope to see what Dad had written. His note said, "Son, you are 1,500 miles from home, and you don't feel any different, do you? I knew you wouldn't because you took with you the one thing that is the cause of all your trouble, that is, yourself. There is nothing wrong with either your body or your mind. It is not the situations you have met that have thrown you. It is what you think of these situations. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. When you realize that, son, come home, for you will be cured." Dad's letter made me angry. I was looking for sympathy, not instruction. I was so mad that I decided then and there that I would never go home. That night, as I was walking down one of the side streets of Miami, I came to a church where services were going on. Having no place to go, I drifted in and listened to the sermon on the text, "He who conquers his spirit is mightier than he who taketh a city." Sitting in the sanctity of the house of God and hearing the same thoughts that my dad had written in his letter, all this swept the accumulated litter out of my brain. I was able to think clearly and sensibly for the first time in my life. I realized what a fool I had been. I was shocked to see myself in my true light. Here I was, wanting to change the whole world and everyone in it, when the only thing that needed changing was the focus of the lens of the camera, which was my mind. The next morning, I packed and started home. A week later, I was back on the job. 4 months later, I married the girl I had been afraid of losing. We now have a happy family of 5 children. God has been good to me, both materially and mentally. At the time of the breakdown, I was a night foreman of a small department handling 18 people. I am now superintendent of carton manufacture in charge of over 450 people. Life is much fuller and friendlier. I believe I appreciate the true values of life now. When moments of uneasiness try to creep in, as they will in everyone's life, I tell myself to get that camera back in focus, and everything is okay. I can honestly say that I am glad I had the breakdown, because I found out the hard way what power our thoughts can have over our mind and body. Now I can make my thoughts work for me instead of against me. I can see now that Dad was right when he said it wasn't outward situations that had caused all my suffering, but what I thought of those situations. And as soon as I realized that, I was cured, and stayed cured. Such was the experience of this student. I'm deeply convinced that our peace of mind and the joy we get out of living depends not on where we are or what we have or who we are, but solely upon our mental attitude. Outward conditions have very little to do with it. For example, let's take the case of old John Brown, who was hanged for seizing the United States arsenal at Harper's Ferry and trying to incite the slaves to rebellion. He rode away to the gallows, sitting on his coffin. The jailer who rode beside him was nervous and worried, but old John Brown was calm and cool. Looking up at the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, he exclaimed, "What a beautiful country! I never had an opportunity to really see it before." Or take the case of Robert Falcon Scott and his companions, the first Englishmen ever to reach the South Pole. Their return trip was probably the cruelest journey ever undertaken by man. Their food was gone, and so was their fuel. They could no longer march because a howling blizzard roared down over the rim of the earth for 11 days and nights, a wind so fierce and sharp that it cut ridges in the polar ice. Scott and his companions knew they were going to die, and they had brought a quantity of opium along for just such an emergency. A big dose of opium, and they could all lie down to pleasant dreams, never to wake again. But they ignored the drug and died singing ringing songs of cheer. We know they did because of a farewell letter found with their frozen bodies by a searching party 8 months later. Yes, if we cherish creative thoughts of courage and calmness, we can enjoy the scenery while sitting on our coffin, riding to the gallows. Or we can fill our tents with ringing songs of cheer while starving and freezing to death. Milton, in his blindness, discovered that same truth 300 years ago. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. Napoleon and Helen Keller are perfect illustrations of Milton's statement. Napoleon had everything men usually crave: glory, power, riches. Yet he said at St. Helena, "I have never known 6 happy days in my life," while Helen Keller, blind, deaf, dumb, declared, "I have found life so beautiful." If half a century of living has taught me anything at all, it has taught me that nothing can bring you peace but yourself. I'm merely trying to repeat what Emerson said so well in the closing words of his essay on self-reliance. A political victory, a rise in rents, the recovery of your sick, or the return of your absent friend, or some other quite external event raises your spirits, and you think good days are preparing for you. Do not believe it. It can never be so. Nothing can bring you peace but yourself. Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher, warned that we ought to be more concerned about removing wrong thoughts from the mind than about removing tumors and abscesses from the body. Epictetus said that 19 centuries ago, but modern medicine would back him up. Dr. G. Canby Robinson declared that 4 out of 5 patients admitted to Johns Hopkins Hospital were suffering from conditions brought on in part by emotional strains and stresses. This was often true, even in cases of organic disturbances. Eventually, he declared, these traced back to maladjustments to life and its problems. Montaigne, the great French philosopher, adopted these 17 words as the motto of his life. A man is not hurt so much by what happens as by his opinion of what happens, and our opinion of what happens is entirely up to us. And what do I mean? Have I the colossal effrontery to tell you to your face when you're mowed down by troubles and your nerves are sticking out like wires and curling up at the ends? Have I the colossal effrontery to tell you that under those conditions you can change your mental attitude by an effort of the will? Yes, I mean precisely that. And that is not all. I am going to show you how to do it. It may take a little effort, but the secret is simple. William James, who has never been topped in his knowledge of practical psychology, once made this observation. Action seems to follow feeling, but really action and feeling go together. And by regulating the action, which is under the more direct control of the will, we can indirectly regulate the feeling, which is not. In other words, William James tells us that we cannot instantly change our emotions just by making up our minds to, but that we can change our actions, and that when we change our actions, we will automatically change our feelings. Thus, he explains, the sovereign voluntary path to cheerfulness, if your cheerfulness be lost, is to set up cheerfully and to act and speak as if cheerfulness were already there. Does that simple trick work? Try it yourself. Put a big, broad, honest-to-God smile on your face. Throw back your shoulders, take a good deep breath, and sing a snatch of song. If you can't sing, whistle. If you can't whistle, hum. You will quickly discover what William James was talking about, that it is physically impossible to remain blue or depressed while you're acting out the symptoms of being radiantly happy. This is one of the little basic truths of nature that can easily work miracles in all our lives. I know a woman in California, I won't mention her name, who could wipe out all of her miseries in 24 hours if she only knew this secret. She's old and she's a widow, and that's sad, I admit. But does she try to act happy? No. If you ask her how she is feeling, she says, "Oh, I'm all right." But the expression on her face and the whine in her voice say, "Oh, God, if you only knew the troubles I've seen." She seems to reproach you for being happy in her presence. Hundreds of women are worse off than she is. Her husband left her enough insurance to last the rest of her life. She has married children to give her a home, but I've rarely seen her smile. She complains that all 3 of her sons-in-law are stingy and selfish, although she's a guest in their homes for months at a time. And she complains that her daughters never give her presents, although she hoards her own money carefully for my old age. She's a blight on herself and her unfortunate family. But does it have to be so? That's the pity of it. She could change herself from a miserable, bitter, and unhappy old woman into an honored and beloved member of the family, if she wanted to change. All she would have to do to work this transformation would be to start acting cheerful, start acting as though she had a little love to give away, instead of squandering it all on her own unhappy and embittered self. H.J. Englert of Tell City, Indiana, is still alive today because he discovered this secret. 10 years ago, Mr. Englert had a case of scarlet fever, and when he recovered, he found that he had developed nephritis, a kidney disease. He tried all kinds of doctors, even quacks, he informed me, and nothing could cure him. Then, a short time ago, he got other complications. His blood pressure soared. He went to a doctor and was told that his blood pressure was hitting the top at 214. He was told that it was fatal, that the condition was progressive, and he had better put his affairs in order at once. I went home, he says, and made sure that my insurance was all paid up. Then I apologized to my Maker for all my mistakes and settled down to gloomy meditations. I made everyone unhappy. My wife and family were miserable, and I was buried deep in depression myself. However, after a week of wallowing in self-pity, I said to myself, "You're acting like a fool. You may not die for a year yet, so why not try to be happy while you're here?" I threw back my shoulders, put a smile on my face, and attempted to act as though everything were normal. I admit it was an effort at first, but I forced myself to be pleasant and cheerful, and this not only helped my family, but it also helped me. The first thing I knew, I began to feel better, almost as well as I pretended to feel. The improvement went on, and today, months after I was supposed to be in my grave, I am not only happy, well, and alive, but my blood pressure is down. I know one thing for certain. The doctor's prediction would certainly have come true if I had gone on thinking dying thoughts of defeat. But I gave my body a chance to heal itself by nothing in the world but a change of mental attitude. Let me ask you a question. If merely acting cheerful and thinking positive thoughts of health and courage could save this man's life, why should you and I tolerate for 1 minute more our minor glooms and depressions? Why make ourselves and everyone around us unhappy and blue when it's possible for us to start creating happiness by merely acting cheerful? Years ago, I read a little book that had a lasting and profound effect on my life. It was called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. And here's what it said. A man will find that as he alters his thoughts toward things and other people will alter towards him. Let a man radically alter his thoughts, and he will be astonished at the rapid transformation it will effect in the material conditions of his life. Men do not attract that which they want, but that which they are. The divinity that shapes our ends is in ourselves. It is our very self. All that a man achieves is the direct result of his own thoughts. A man can only rise, conquer, and achieve by lifting up his thoughts. He can only remain weak and abject and miserable by refusing to lift up his thoughts. According to the book of Genesis, the Creator gave man dominion over the whole wide earth, a mighty big present. But I'm not interested in any such super royal prerogatives. All I desire is dominion over myself, dominion over my thoughts, dominion over my fears, dominion over my mind and over my spirit. And the wonderful thing is that I know I can attain this dominion to an astonishing degree any time I want to, by merely controlling my actions, which in turn control my reactions. So let us remember these words of William James. Much of what we call evil can often be converted into a bracing and tonic good by a simple change of the sufferer's inner attitude, from one of fear to one of fight. Let's fight for our happiness. Let's fight for our happiness by following a daily program of cheerful and constructive thinking. Here is such a program. It is entitled Just for Today. I found this program so inspiring that I gave away hundreds of copies. It was written by the late Sybil F. Partridge. If you and I follow it, we will eliminate most of our worries and increase immeasurably our portion of what the French call
Mm.